Users of Reddit who have accidentally caused the death of another person. What happened? Story 1. To kick this thread off, I was molested by my cousin, who was babysitting me when I was 4. I told on her, and she ended her own life. Story 2. I've posted this before in more detail, but the truncated version is when I was 16 years old I hit an 87-year-old man after he ran stop sign. I was with him holding his hand when he died on the sidewalk. He had a heart attack. They weren't able to determine if he had the heart attack before the accident, which would explain why he blew through the stop sign, or if he had one as a result. His family was very gracious, and I am very grateful for them. His son called me the day after it happened and told me his mom had died 6 months prior. His dad had been very depressed, and while they were sad he died this way, they were happy to think their parents were reunited. Story 3. I was dating this girl that was a little dysfunctional due to being abused by her grandpa, and nobody knew about it. I noticed some red flags and got her to open up and tell me about it. After we broke up, I told her mom she should stop inviting grandpa over to Thanksgiving dinners due to the abuse. The mom called me a liar, but after asking the other daughters/cousins about it, they confirmed it was true and that they had all been molested too. After word got back to grandma, she said, "I'll take care of it." Fast forward a week and grandpa is dead. Apparently grandpa had a lot of serious medications he was taking and grandma messed with the dosage, which killed him. His death was ruled natural cause and nothing ever happened to grandma. Story 4. It was my mother-in-law's birthday, and her daughter and son-in-law had dinner for the event at their place. My wife, 3 kids, and I drove out after work. As we pulled up to their cul-de-sac home in the dark, I saw something odd in the grass between the sidewalk and street near their mailbox. When I got out, an old man, 80-plus-year-old, called over to me asking if I wouldn't mind helping him up. Said he had been out for a walk, stumbled, and had been in that spot for about 45 minutes. My wife and daughters went inside the house. My then 12-year-old son stayed with me while I helped the man up. Wonderful guy, started saying this was the icing on the cake for his day, as he had fallen asleep early afternoon on his couch with a lit cigarette, which caught the couch on fire. Fire department came, put the fire out with little damage, and moved the couch to the curb when they were done. By this time, my brother-in-law had come outside with us. We walked the man back to his house, about 5 doors down. During our trip there, he regaled us with stories of him in the Navy during the war, and I'm ashamed to say, I can't remember which war he had said. He made special not to talk to my son about how wonderful it was that he was helping. Introduced himself to us as Bill. Said he was the last unpaid bill. Thought that was pretty clever. As we made to leave, he asked if we would bring his couch from the curb back up to the house for him. Not sure why he wanted it, didn't ask. So my BIL and I moved the couch and set it next to the house outside of his garage. We wished Bill well, then headed back to the house for dinner. When I got in, I noticed that my shirt smelled of burnt plastic. BIL gave me a sweatshirt to change into, and we had a great birthday celebration before I and the family left about 2 hours later for home. Around 2:30 the next morning, our phone rang. My wife answered, and I pretended to be more asleep than I actually was so I didn't have to deal with a bad phone call in the wee early hours. They're very seldom about good thing. It was the police department from the town my BIL and SIL lived in. They asked me questions about my activities the previous evening while I was at their house. The couch reignited and burned Bill's house down, killing him in the process. The police grilled my BIL, examined his arms, then called me. I don't think I slept well for over a month afterwards, and couldn't get the tragedy out of my head for a long time. I should have known from the smell on my clothes that it wasn't safe to move that damnable couch. I should have put the pieces together, but I was just too interested in getting back to my family to celebrate. Nothing more ever came of it, but I'll never get rid of the knowledge that, if I hadn't committed to one simple action that I had performed, then another human being would not have died. I was relieved when my SIL and BIL moved a couple of years later, because I hated seeing that empty lot every time I went to their house. This was maybe 11 years ago, but to this day, about once a year around my mother-in-law's birthday, my brother-in-law and I still have a toast to the last unpaid bill. Story 5. War survivor from Chechnya 94 to 96 war. I told a girl, maybe 17-year-old, to run out from the apartment building because I was so sure it was going to collapse. It didn't collapse, and she ran out into a hail of gunfire and died. I was so scared that I stayed in the building, and it just never collapsed the entire time, so I left out the back. I often think about that. It was such a quick decision. She was right near the door. I was on my way out because the building felt like it was shaking, and I saw her and said, "Run out, the roof is gonna fall." And she ran out in a hurry and got blown apart by gunfire, shrieking in pain until she was hit again and presumably died. I wish I didn't tell her that, obviously. It still sort of haunts me to this day, especially her screaming. But I also know that I made the decision in goodwill, trying to save her life. And to be fair, the building really felt like it was going to collapse, and everyone was running out, not just me. Anybody would have told her to run as well. Nobody knew they were opening fire on the building. I know it sounds like lame justifications, but it is all I can think of to help ease my mind. Anybody would have done the same. I hope, at least. Story 6. I was supposed to meet a friend to head to soccer practice, but he wasn't there when I got to where we were supposed to meet. I got impatient and decided to head to practice myself. He never got there, so I assumed he was sick or something. 2 days later, my mom told me he got hit by a car and died after running out in the street to get a ball he was kicking while waiting for me. The timing of things seems like if I had waited just a minute longer, he wouldn't have had to wait for me and would have lived. Story 7. I was driving from a friend's house last November on a road I've driven a million times. I knew one area was particularly dark at night because the city hadn't replaced the street lights in over a decade. The dark area also crests a hill in a residential area between two crosswalks that are far apart, so people cross the road at the top of this hill. Knowing all this, I still never saw him coming. There was a huge thud, and my window was cracked all the way across. I turned around and saw him laying motionless on the sidewalk. It was late and no one else was there, so it was just me, parked on a side street, and this body. I checked his pulse while I was on the phone with 911 but couldn't feel anything, because I was shaking so badly. This was maybe a quarter mile from the hospital, so the paramedics were there before I even realized what happened. They put him up on a stretcher with this strange device that I found out later was to automatically compress his chest. The cops showed up, and I finally saw my car with a flashlight. There was a large chunk of flesh and blood caught on the side of my car. I passed my sobriety test, and they took me home. He lived for 3 days before dying due to complications of the accident, and was never conscious during that time. I found out through a friend of mine who's the editor at a local paper that the police were still considering charges, also how I found out that he died. I was obviously a mess about the accident, but also the possibility of involuntary manslaughter. After the officer called me to tell me officially that he died, I consulted a lawyer and was basically told not to talk to the police again and to let them conduct their investigation. 2 grueling weeks later, I got a phone call at midnight from the officer who gave me my sobriety test. He worked 3rd shift. He told B that the guy was incredibly intoxicated and basically stepped into oncoming traffic without paying attention. With that info, I wasn't to be charged and I could go pick my car back up. The relief I felt was indescribable, but also terrible that I could feel so great in a situation where someone died. What made that feeling worst was that the officer told me the family of the guy were super concerned with how I was doing, and that they wanted to tell me they didn't blame me. He was 24 and had just graduated college. It was his last night in town before going back to his hometown. I go to his Facebook page every once in a while just so I don't forget what he looked like. Sorry if this comes through as rambling, but I've been actually explained this in writing before. Story 8. I'm at least partially responsible for 3 deaths. So I'm a weather forecaster. A few years ago I was forecasting for Afghanistan. Now we were doing these forecasts from a base in the States, which means we had to coordinate our forecast with someone who was deployed to Afghanistan. Sometimes the downrange forecaster was really experienced, other times they weren't. It was a mixed bag. Anyway, I had been forecasting for this region for at least 2 years at the time of this incident. I was familiar with it, and I was actually in a supervisory capacity, simply overseeing all of the forecasts going out in my zone. Well, one day I was talking with one of my forecasters about the potential for large hail and how I'd like him to put that in his forecast. Now that's a big thing to put in a forecast because of how operationally significant it is. Aircraft must be put in hangars, missions are canceled, assets must be protected, etc. So when it came time to discuss this with the downrange forecaster, he was absolutely against it. He didn't want to brief that to the commander because, again, missions have to be canceled based on what you think will happen. If you're wrong, you've set back a lot of people and wasted a lot of time. So the deployed forecaster tries to argue against it, but his reasoning really just boiled down to, I don't want to brief that. So when I wasn't looking, he essentially just pulled rank on my junior forecaster and forced him to take it out of the forecast. And so it went out to the base with no hail in it, only hinting at some vicinity thunderstorms. Well, when I noticed I was pissed, but I said screw it, we'll let him be wrong. This was the first time I'd ever wanted to put large hail in a forecast. Maybe we were over-forecasting it. Nope. Basically right on schedule, a huge thunderstorm popped up and dumped large hail on the base. It did a few million in damage to aircraft, injured a Hello pilot who was pre-flighting his bird, and killed 3 Afghan National Army soldiers who had left on a patrol and couldn't find any cover. They wound up beaten to death by hail. That has always bugged me. They didn't need to die. We knew the potential was there, and I basically just let an incorrect forecast go out that got them killed. Story 9. I used to work a strange overnight schedule. 10-hour shifts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'd try and keep awake the same hours on my days off, especially on Thursdays. This was a pretty rural area, so there wasn't much open at those hours except a gas station that had a tiny cafe area. I didn't want to keep people in the house awake, so I spent a lot of time at the gas station. I'd usually read or talk with the cashier on duty. I think she felt a little safer having someone else there too. One night a man comes in with a little boy and asks if they can use the bathroom. It's something like 3 a.m. The kid looks sick or uncomfortable. To me it looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. After they're in the bathroom, the cashier and I look at each other. She thinks there's something off about this too. I went outside to get a description of the vehicle. After they leave we call the police. The local police passed it along to the county sheriff's department, and a local officer came to the gas station. He asked us a couple more questions, and we listened to his radio to hear what was happening. A county officer spots the truck and pulls it over. After the officer gets out of the car, the truck backs into it and takes off. The police pursue him. We didn't get a lot of details after that. He crashed or abandoned the truck. The truck was on fire and loose rounds of ammunition was going off in the truck. I believe the boy was somewhere safe because I didn't hear any more about him. The guy tried to swim across a small but deceptively treacherous river and he drowned. That was close to 20 years ago. If I remember correctly, he was the boy's dad, but did not have custody. He was recently released from prison and the truck was stolen. Story 10. When I was 18, I was working the night shift in a nursing home as an aide. Part of my job was to turn the paralyzed patients every 2 hours to make sure they didn't get bed sores, etc. This one particular resident had late-stage Parkinson's diseases, and her muscles and joints were stiff and brittle, and she was catatonic. As I was flipping her from one side to another, I applied light pressure to her leg to move her back a bit, and this snapped her femur. Given her age and health, the doctors decided that surgery was dangerous, and she would have to heal on its own, if at all. Because of this, we could no longer flip her, which resulted in bed sores. She eventually went septic from those bed sores and died of septic shock. I always felt so bad about that. Story 11. It was about 3 a.m. on a Thursday last December. I lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time. I was heading back from a party at a friend's house, pretty bleary-eyed. I had slept for a few hours, and then got in my car. I was running out of gas, so I stopped at a gas station right off of I-95 before heading north to home. A guy walks up to me while I'm pumping gas, and he asks for directions. He was older and a bit drunk. He came off as a yachty, and yachties are really common in that part of town. I had a bunch of yachty friends, so he didn't sketch me out, but I immediately kind of wrote him off. I told him to take I-95 north. He stumbles off and gets on his Vespa. Scooters are super common in South Florida, and then drives away. I go inside, get a drink, then sit in my car for a few minutes, waking up, before going. I hit the highway, and I'm cruising north when I see a ton of emergency lights coming down the southbound side. I remember thinking, oh shit, something's going down. I start paying closer attention to the road in front of me, and there are lights in my rear view too, coming up really fucking gassed. What happened next was kind of a blur, and is NWS. There were recognizable body parts in the road. Part of an arm, an upper torso with the head attached, blood everywhere. Bits and pieces of plastic and metal in the road, and lumps of flesh or organ or something. I didn't see any of it until I was extremely close, but the image is something that has really fucked me up. I called my mom. She said I was incoherent and screaming about blood. FHP checked my car, which had blood on it but no damage, the next day, and the officer explained to me an older white male on a scooter had gotten on I-95 north. He merged inappropriately and was hit by a dump truck, and his corpse was hit by several other vehicles including mine. They closed I-95 for the entire morning, well past rush hour. The news article said that remains and debris were strewn across an area the size of a football field. I sold my car and moved. The first 2 months were very rough, but I'm feeling better now. Despite shaking ATM. Story 12. 7-ish am on a Sunday morning. I'm heading to work in a small town at the age of 15 or 16. Come over a crest on a hill and have no time to react. T-bone someone making an illegal U-turn in a driveway. All I remember is veering off to the right and damaging someone's stone wall after the hit, crawling out of the wreckage out of breath, and stumbling to see if the other person was okay. Their vehicle spun multiple times and landed in a ditch facing away, but driver's side visible from where I originally was. Driver wasn't there. Move along the vehicle and check the other side. Driver is hanging out of the passenger side window with a steady stream of blood from their skull. Bottom line for me is that I ask and implore everyone, please use your seatbelt. Story 13. My mom is Thai and my dad is American, so I spend most of the year in the US and summers in Thailand. When I was 8, my family and my cousin's family were at the beach in Chiam. My cousin's son, James, and I had been playing in the ocean for hours by this time, and we were both exhausted. Since we began playing, the water got much more violent with large waves as a thunderstorm was starting. As soon as my parents heard lightning, they yelled for us to come back to the shore, and I just started swimming back without checking to see if James was following. When I walked up onto the sand, I looked back, and I couldn't see him. We were much farther out than 2 8-year-olds should have been, and James was too tired to keep himself above the water. I'm not sure what I could have done once I realized I couldn't find him, but I can't stop thinking about it. And when I go back to the condo there, I can't bring myself to get back into the ocean. Story 14. I was 14 years old. It was a Sunday afternoon, somewhere in Europe. I was returning from a soccer match with my dad and 2 neighbors, friends of my dad. Going through my neighborhood, we met a new neighbor. They had moved in a few weeks earlier. He was returning from a hunting trip and was unloading a couple of rifles from his car. We said hello and chatted for a bit. Curious, 14-year-old me couldn't take my eyes off the rifles. I had never before seen anything like it up close. He noticed and asked if I wanted to hold it. Of course I wanted to. My father and one of the others asked something along the lines of, "It isn't loaded, I presume?" The hunter said, "Of course it isn't," and handed me the gun. The moment I took it, it went off, hitting his 7-year-old daughter, who came running from the backside of the house, more or less in the middle of the chest. She was dead before the ambulance arrived. She was their only child, and had celebrated her 7th birthday just days prior. The aftermath was a lot of police, investigations, and a generally bad time. It felt like I fell down a dark, empty hole and shut myself completely in. I don't remember much from the years that followed. I existed, but that was it. Legally, I was acquitted. Everyone agreed that the hunting neighbor had stated the gun wasn't loaded, and that he practically insisted on me holding it. The hunter himself got some kind of suspended jail sentence. The years since has been bad for most involved. The hunter was divorced from his wife shortly after. I heard he got some kind of depression and apparently has been in and out of a mental hospital. His wife is consumed by hatred and shows up to threaten me any time she can find me. I have moved repeatedly and even changed my name, but she still finds me regularly. I have filed several court orders against her, and she is forbidden to come closer than a few km from me, but that doesn't stop her. She has never hurt me physically, though, but she usually say that she'll kill me one day. My father took this very hard and was in dark place for years. He is now retired and spends most of his time doing various volunteer work for youth organizations and the like. I know it is way of doing some kind penance. My mother died a few years ago and was an amazing support for me, even though we never discussed the incident or the dead girl. I was never able to get back into any kind of meaningful education, barely managing to finish my country's version of high school. I now live and work with my brother, and I'm doing kinda okay. I never speak to anyone about this, except my father. Story 15. Mine was through decision, but I felt as though I had personally done the deed. Freshman year of college, a bunch of friends and I had planned on going out camping for Memorial Day weekend. At the last minute, I changed the plans on us to go swimming and staying at my family's lake house instead, because beds and TV and stuff. First night, and it in the water, we decided to swim out to the middle of the lake and just tread water and laugh and splash around. After a while we all swam back to the dock, and I was second to last in front of Tommy. Tommy never got out. I dove back in but couldn't find him anywhere. We had no phone in the cabin, So after I ran back up the hill, I ran barefoot down the gravel road, to the main road, then to the nearest neighbor's house, hysterical. They called the police, and then at the end divers found him about 12 feet from the end of the dock. I blamed myself horribly for the change of our plans. I sat through the funeral numbly, while his parents lied to me about how much he looked forward for weeks to the swimming trip. I stopped going to my honors classes and drank and smoked myself into an opium stupor for the rest of the semester and failed out of college. I kept abusing myself for 2 years until I finally got myself some help with my depression over it. Story 16. Was skiing with a friend when I was still living in Colorado. We were going a good speed and enjoying the mountain. When we came back onto the main trail, he was still going really fast. I yelled at him to slow down, and an elderly lady ended up merging at the same time as he looked back at me. My buddy is a good-sized guy and ended up colliding with this old woman. The ski patrol ended up grabbing her from the mountain, and she was clearly in a lot of pain. She ended up dying from her injuries a few days later. After their investigation, my buddy and the woman were both in the wrong. He had to pay some fines but never got any sort of lawsuit. Story 17. My friend was a well-known and liked guy. Very social. Did drama, football, and baseball in high school. Some of the best moments of my life was with him. One day he just stopped coming around. He would read my messages but not reply. He ignored anyone else. It was so bizarre. One day he came to my house, and it was like the good old days. He said he got into target shooting, but his gun blew up because he fired a bullet that had been in the washing machine. He had some powder burns on his hands. He asked to borrow one of my guns, and I said yes. 2 days later, he shot himself with it. I've hated myself since. Most of our mutual friends hate me. His family hates me, and I was barred from his funeral. I feel so bad I didn't see the signs. I miss you, Tom. I wish I could have helped you like you did me. Edit. To clarify, he borrowed my gun. Also, thank you all so much for your words of support. I wish people here could see things how you did. It's taken years, but I no longer blame myself for what happened. It still haunts me. He was being himself that day, laughing, joking, and making plans for us to hang out more. I let him borrow the gun without a second thought, because I got lost in the moment. Plus, as soon as I said yes, he carried on like it was no big deal. We grew up with guns. A lot of people don't see that. Most never asked. To them, I'm the piece of crap who gave him the gun. Plus, Tom was a very popular person, and I never was. So I guess it's easier for them to demonize me. It still hurts though. I wish I could have talked to him about how he was feeling. I wish he'd shown a sign of sadness, something to clue me in. Every day, I spend time playing the what-if game. I get everyone who knew him lost someone special, but so did I. And it's like I'm not allowed to grieve for him publicly. Story 18. When I was younger playing Xbox whilst at my grandparents' house, I had left the room to go to the bathroom, leaving my wired controller on the floor. I suddenly hear a thud, and decided to finish my business before seeing where it had came from. Whilst cleaning up, I heard a scream from my grandma, and was told to stay in the bathroom. And so I did. Found out that my grandfather had accidentally stood on my controller and fell over the wire, cracking his skull open on the table, and was announced dead at the scene when the ambulance arrived. I am now extra cautious with where I leave items, encouraging my younger brother and sister to clear up their mess once they're done. Story 19. I was skiing with my friends on a school trip. As we went to sit on the chair lift, our skis locked. The way that happened meant that one of my friends ended up sighting on top of the other. The lift operator didn't stop the lift, and we couldn't get off by the time we realized what was happening. It was my job to pull the ski bar down, but I couldn't due to the positing of people in the lift. Long story short, my friend ended up slipping, and I was holding on to her as she dangled off the lift. I was wearing thick skiing gloves, so my grip on her was loose. She was screaming so much, but she stopped for a second, looked me in the eye and said, "Please don't let go." And then my grip gave in, and she fell about 4 stories into some rocks near a river. We were shouting at the lift operator, but he was too slow to react. The girl died from internal bleeding and shock, as her legs twisted in a fucked up way when she landed. She went into cardiac arrest and died. I was questioned profusely by the police, and was treated as a suspect. I was bullied endlessly, both online and IRL. In the end, I blamed myself, and I still do to this day. This really is the nutshell version, but out of respect to people involved, I won't give any details, since it was only 4 to 5 years ago. Story 20. I wouldn't say I caused this death, but this is kind of in that realm. But my roommate's dad died most likely while I was in the other room, oblivious that he was at our house. He was in town for a few days, for an appointment he had for heart surgery later this day. I woke up early for homework before class, and he texted me to borrow my truck to go to the convenience store, so I gave him the keys, finished my work, then went to class after he got back. I got back from class maybe 2 or 3 hours later, and about an hour or two after that, my second roommate, not the son, came home, and shortly after my roommates, the son's, mom came to the house in a sweat, asking where the dad was. She said she had called him several times, and he didn't pick up. We went into my roommate's room, and there he was. But he wasn't sleeping, it was different, you could tell. Anyways, we got him down, and I performed CPR while the others called the cops. They were there fast. But he didn't make it. I think they thought I would blame myself. The EMTs, or whatever they're called, each told me that I did everything right, probably didn't want me to blame myself. And I don't. But if I had known, maybe it would have been different. I'm almost certain that I was in the other room when he died, but just never knew. I didn't know just how serious his heart condition was until after all of this. Story 21. Former paramedic here. We tend to have a fair share of what we ourselves consider deaths we are responsible for. You don't always interpret all situations right. There are days your hands are a tiny bit shaky, and you miss that vein or trachea, etc. But I will always remember the first one, as a fresh paramedic, 65 years old male with chest pain, just had his birthday yesterday. Now presents with chest pain. For this we give nitroglycerin as a spray. Works well, but has a downside. It reacts massively and violently with Viagra, etc., which was a brand new drug on the market back then. I asked the patient if he took any medication, he says no. Now the seasoned paramedics already know where this is heading. I of course forgot to ask the wife to leave Guy the room and ask again. Because he visited a hooker for his birthday. He crashed half a minute after I gave him the nitroglycerin, and despite all efforts died on scene. Edit, as it is asked a lot, we found out about his secret birthday party via the police investigation. Every death that is non-expected in my country mandates a police investigation to rule out any wrongdoings. One of his friends told police the truth, and I'm fairly sure the family received the police report as well. Edit 2. Nowadays it is protocol for most services to explain to the patient that he will most likely die if he has taken any Viagra, etc. The consequences were known back then, 1999, merely months after it became available in my neck of the woods, as well, but we weren't as explicitly trained on it. It needed a few cases like the one above to change training and push that scenario into every healthcare professional's mind. Story 22. Deployed in Afghanistan. Urban area. I got into programming to kill the time. Had an Arduino set complete with everything I would need to make tons of little gadgets. Got pretty good at it too, going to school for it when I get out. When it came time to go home, I didn't have room to take the kit with me, so I threw it out. Keep in mind locals work on this base, and in my time there, at least 3 had been kicked out for ties with the Taliban. Within an hour of tossing the kit, it had been taken. Didn't think anything of it, probably some other soldier thought it was cool and took it. Big base, anything could happen. About 3 weeks after we left, an IED went off outside the gate. No NATO casualties, but about 20 civilians died in the blast. Yodi reported that it was a strangely sophisticated bomb. They used my kit. My negligence gave them the means to kill 20 innocent people. I've never told anyone in the world about this, and it haunts me to this day. Story 23. So I'm a mental health worker who has recently had a patient kill themselves. They sadly aren't my first and won't be my last. I followed protocol and didn't do anything medically wrong, but will always feel personally responsible for them. There were signs I missed, lies I believed, and things I do differently in hindsight. Some of the families put cases against the hospital, but I've been cleared of any wrongdoing. Unfortunately, when you have the riskiest cases, then you can't win all the time. That doesn't stop me feeling incredibly sad when it happens, and imagine the family grieving for a lost son/brother/father. I will always remember their names, and have planted a tree in each of their honor. I strive to become a better nurse each time. Story 24. I was the first car at a red light, with a gray car to my right in the right lane. I picked up a habit to look both ways when a light turns green, and it never proved worth it until now. So my light turns green, and before I go, I check left and right like usual. This time, I see a red truck speeding at least 100 miles per hour, trying to make his red light. 2 whole seconds pass, and I'm still waiting, but the gray car to my right didn't see the red truck speeding, so he went along. Huge collision. The gray car that was to my right is now rolled over, hitting two other cars in the other lanes, and the red truck that sped through hardly had a front anymore. This happened no more than 5 meters away from me. I think I was in such shock that I proceeded on my way without much consideration or checking up on them or anything, which would be one of my greatest regrets. I always wonder what would have happened if I did not check left or right before going. Probably wouldn't be typing this, to be honest. Also, that gray car wouldn't have been T-boned and flipped, so I have a bit of survivor's guilt, I guess, about that. I wish there was a way to reach out and see what happened to that gray car. I hope he or she and all their passengers are all right. I often use this story as a cautionary tale about always checking before going, even if your light is green. Green doesn't mean go, it means proceed if safe. Story 25. Not exactly caused by me, but I was definitely part of it. When we were 15 or 16, we had a guy in school who got bullied real hard and ended up committing suicide. I remember being quite nice to him whenever we were on our own, but being quite insecure myself at the time. I've also been a douche to him in the group a few times. It was definitely life-changing and shaped my character to the better. It's just scary that you completely fail to realize what such actions can do to somebody when you're a teenager. On a side note, there were definitely more things to it, as we have realized afterwards. He immigrated to us from Albania, had no father, and certainly nobody to talk to about these things. Close before his death, he openly dealt with satanic rituals and such. At that time, he also had a girlfriend who shared these things with him, and probably also had a hard time. Regarding the questions about how everyone felt, I can't even say how the real bullies felt after that. We haven't been talking about it much anymore. I can definitely say that New never came out with how much he has liked him or such, but I suppose they have all been in sorrow privately. I know that they have all turned into more or less good people after all. Also, despite the fact that I accept having been part of it, I still don't consider myself a bully. I was also always on the lower end of the food chain, as I developed very late, and looking like a young boy in a class of 30 young men is definitely a think you need to stand. But still, there is no excuse to ever join such a bully train on a weaker guy. The most important conclusion I have from that time is that you as a parent are asked more than ever to deal with the problems of your child and never let him out alone in the rain. Teenagers can be so incredibly cruel, and they don't have ability to realize the impact of such actions.